What we are developing long-term is a suite of tools that are operable on a mobile or edge device, and that there will be an AI layer that makes all of that cohesive, sticky, interoperable, and high value to extend the human operator.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the U.S. Department of Defense each year, but so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Scheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley. One of the coolest themes we see in defense tech is veterans starting and growing companies to build the tools they wish they had in uniform. Today's guests are no exception. Garrett Smith is the co-founder and CEO of Reveal Technology. Dave Caudle is the company's vice president of defense and security. Reveal's a really impressive software team that's building technology to supercharge the human operator. This team has started as a small and scrappy startup and grown to be one of the fastest moving, operationally impactful startups in the ecosystem. They began with processing sensor-collected imagery to create high-quality 3D models in near real time, and recent awards have positioned them to win major programs, and they've even bought a company to help them introduce a new, even faster-growing product line. Today, we're going to go in depth with Garrett and Dave to talk about Reveal's capabilities, the team that they've built, and how they've maneuvered the valley of death on their path to production. Enjoy. All right, everyone. I am psyched. Today, we are here with the CEO and founder of Reveal Technology, Garrett Smith, and the VP of Defense at Reveal, Dave Caudle. Gents, this is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for making time.
Thanks, Noah. Awesome. We're excited.
Same here. So Reveal is probably one of the most exciting companies, and you guys have at the same time managed to build what you're doing without being on the front page of Defense Daily and without being the sponsor of every defense tech conference around the country. So I'm stoked to kind of give the audience here a little bit of a window into the magic that's being built out in Bozeman. Garrett, kick us off. What is Reveal all about? Why does this company exist?
Yeah, so first off, no, it's super generous. It's not for lack of trying. We've tried to get on front pages. We've tried, with our guerrilla marketing campaign, we've tried. But no, I think the way you've described us, I like, because we are trying to do things quietly and correctly without overhyping ourselves. We want to build real capability, and I think we're doing that, and we're doing it quietly, the right way. Deep background, though, Reveal really started with a vision for delivering a capability that we wish we had back when we were in tactical, high-risk scenarios. And so when we left active service, many of us in the company and certainly the founding set and Dave when he joined, we brought with us a huge amount of empathy and understanding and use case experience that helped define what we think is a pretty great set of products. We're just trying to solve a problem that we know intimately, that we know is still a problem for warfighters as we, emerge from 2 decades of desert warfare into, a new reality of facing down geostrategic near-peer adversaries.
It's an awesome intro because there was something in the news a couple weeks ago really pissed me off. Is one of these journalists came out and said something like, the tech bros are trying to define the future of war. It was implicit that there's a bunch of dudes out in Silicon Valley who woke up one morning and decided they understood how to build for ConOps. And my reaction was well, damn, most of the people I know building in defense tech have deep backgrounds in service. And both of you, Garrett, you in the Marines, Dave, you in the Army. Can you talk to us a little bit about what was the decision like for you to make to stay in this industry when you left service, and how it's kind of a continuation for you of your mission?
Yeah, good question. And Garrett, I think Garrett already alluded to it, right? But this problem, the specific set of problems that Reveal is attempting to address, or Reveal is addressing, are really problems that I felt intimately and personally during my time in service, and not just during the active duty time. Garrett and I also still serve part-time. And we were probably the best approximation to in our positions there as to be our actual customer. So we still feel these problems very personally when we put on a uniform. So yeah, it's interesting. The tech bros are thinking think they know what they're talking about. Defense, we've got our chief product officer and our engineers that, they come from the Valley and they're super intelligence, but all of the product direction, all of the problems that we're solving is teed up by the veterans, the strong veteran presence that we have in the company.
It's a great blend, right? It's two sides working together. So let's talk about some of the problems that you are solving. And Garrett, what maybe we'll come to you on this is, what's the mission that you exist to impact?
Dave just spoke to the idea that we are the closest approximation to the customer. And I'll just boil it down this way. 15 years ago, I'm in combat. I have nothing better than a 1 in 50,000 topographic map, some outdated low resolution slant angle imagery of the target location that we're, in the operating area that we're operating in, and not knowing any better and being a good Marine, we just accepted that that's the way it was, didn't question it, didn't even bother requesting better from higher headquarters because we knew they would say no, or that they didn't have the capability to generate better. So we went over the berm. We went around the hill. We went into harm's way, and we did a lot with a little and made the best, adapted, overcame problems. And fast forward a few years from then, I find myself in Silicon Valley and I realize, wow, the state of the art of consumer and commercial technologies and the way that Silicon Valley is actually like revolutionizing the consumer enterprise, commercial future with technology has a lot of potential to solve problems that I almost didn't even know I had in combat. So thinking back to those experiences, I thought to myself, gosh, there's a quick set of really interesting solutions here. We were tracking two different trend lines, though, which were useful as we thought about building a technology to address some of these use cases. And I would say that in general, it's about lack of situational awareness and a lack of good decision-making prompts so that we reduce risk in harm's way. What did we see, though? What did I see when I was in Silicon Valley and kind of looking backwards at my experience? It was, well, nowadays there's a proliferation of small drones and sensors collecting and transmitting a huge and growing body of visual data. Raw data feeds, like huge amount of raw data happening in the very tactical environment. That's happening at the average infantry unit, and I come from a Marine reconnaissance background. We were just, one of the average Marine reconnaissance and infantry echelons. Even now, they're generating a huge amount of data, sensor data off of, their vehicles and small UAS platforms, small drone platforms. So a huge proliferation of data. Second, mobile devices were being deployed at the individual soldier or special operator Marine level. And that, again, was a revolution. Like I didn't have a smartphone on my chest, even though when I was deployed in combat, the smartphone, industry had really picked up after the iPhone launched in 2007. We were there 2009, 10 in harm's way. We didn't have mobile phones because the DoD is very slow to adopt new technologies like that. But nowadays, that has become a standard piece of equipment. So what do you have in a smartphone? You have a mobile high yield processing, device right there on, in the palm of your hand, on your chest. You've got a huge amount of sensor data coming from small distributed sensors, but humans are bad at ingesting and making decisions on raw data feeds. So we looked at that and we were like, oh my gosh, there's a software play here. We could sit in between the human operator and their decision-making matrix and the raw data sensor feeds that are coming in to facilitate better decision-making. So the whole thesis behind our flagship product, which is called Farsight, is all about accelerating and improving tactical decision-making in the most decentralized of environments for the lowest echelon decision makers who are right there at the point of the problem. And we do that with a rapidly generated geospatial intelligence feed. Again, it's like having an S2 or an intelligence cell in the palm of your hand.
I mean, that's pretty wild. That's also, it seems like such a huge leap from, hey, you're out there as a Marine doing this mission to, what I need is like a new piece of software.
Right.
What's the story from like bang to boom of, to being out there in the field? You said, you went back to Silicon Valley, but what were the experiences that even gave you the confidence that like, yeah, not only do I need some software, I'm the guy to build that software?
Well, I'll say one thing and then I'll hand it off to Dave, who's been deep in the trenches at, helping some of our DoD customers actually adopt our technology at scale. I didn't know when I was in combat that software could be a solution, right? But I did speak the language and I had contacts, I had context, and I had the wherewithal to like help craft a narrative that would help break that open for operators, acquisitions professionals, so that they can understand software might be a solution to the problem. Historically, the DoD is really great at buying hardware and very slowly. They almost don't know how to buy software. They don't even know what it is or how it works or what it can do for them. And that's a drastic generalization. And it's not fair to the industry. But I think the DoD and our national security environment and ecosystem are discovering the value of software. Dave has been instrumental in helping translate that message and that learning and that education into direct acquisition pipelines with the U.S. Army through some of our programmatic engagements there. And it didn't happen overnight. Didn't happen quickly. But it has been a deliberate and extremely valuable go-to-market exercise.
That's perfect, because that's exactly where we want to go on this show, right? Which is to talk about that journey in the painstaking, gruesome, excruciating detail. And so, Dave, this is, perfect kind of segue here, which is, if this is the vision, if this is the idea, these are the set of problems, we're trying to make sense of all of these different data streams, turn them into something that's useful. How did you take that to a customer or just a living, breathing human being to start having a discussion that resulted in what is today Reveal?
Yeah, good question. So, the first thing was I started socializing that concept that Garrett just described, right? So Garrett said something interesting. He said, it's basically the S2 in the palm of your hand. Mm-hmm. So when I was working in the hyper tactical environment in the Army infantry, I was taking MRE boxes and stacking them and drawing windows on them to try to create this three-dimensional understanding of the terrain so we could make a tactical plan. But I would go to my higher headquarters and they would have all of these, whiz-bang, sometimes software-based capabilities that would do analysis and situational awareness. So I feel like the necessity, it wasn't hard for me to describe the necessity to the customer set here because they understood what I was saying, which is that hyper tactical echelon, that platoon, that squad, they now have so much stuff and so much information coming at them. And at the same time, in GWOT, we were asking them to do so much more. Through the concept of mission command, we were saying you are now responsible squad for your own piece of terrain or town or whatever. That it necessitated giving them more automated tools, more distillation of what's helpful information. So everybody just fundamentally agreed with me sort of off the bat. This is a problem worth attempting to solve.
Yeah.
But then I have to sort of structure my efforts because through, I think, about 8 years or so of pain now, I've sort of determined what I think the recipe is for sort of transition and programmatic adoption of a fundamentally new capability. And I always describe that in the context of need or interest, requirement, funding, contract, and priority. Not all of those things can come from one office, right? You can't just go in there and have and say we've got a thing and it's better than all the other things, so you should buy it. That's not how the DoD acquisition system works. The DoD doesn't have an innovation system; it has an acquisition system, and the acquisition system is very intentionally designed to build big, exquisite things. It gets a lot of shade thrown at it. I won't do that here. I will say that acquisition system has meant that I've never been in a fair fight. There's always been a big, exquisite, complex system flying over me or supporting me from the water. So it's very good at making sure that I have the best machine gun and the best night vision goggles. It's bad at moving at the pace at which we can produce a software capability that's fundamentally new and helping a squad leader on the edge. So in order to accomplish that sort of recipe for baking the cake, to getting a new capability out into the field, you have to do the work of going to the 5 relevant offices or the 20 people that sit at the intersection of those different ingredients and explain to them what you're doing, what you intend to do, and sort of get them on board one by one, all while you're meaningfully engaged with the user community and your actual true subject matter experts that will employ the capability, which is one of the ways that I think Reveal's really shined. You started us off by saying, hey, Reveal's not on the front page and Reveal's not, sponsoring the entire trade show.
Not yet on the front page.
I know, but it's intentional because when we go out and we spend money on travel, we spend instead of on marketing, instead of on sponsoring the trade show or what have you, because we believe we have made more progress more quickly by spending most of our time and resources building good capability on the range with staff sergeants and sergeant first class and lieutenants and platoon leaders. At any given week at Reveal, we are at fewer conferences having a lot less playing that game and a lot more on the range breaking things with robotic operators.
So a member of our board of directors, General Peter Pace, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the mid-2000s and just an exceptional Marine leader of men and women. He, in one of our earliest sessions, right when he came on as one of our board directors, said, I encourage you, Reveal Leadership, to ensure that you're building capability for private pace, private Smith, and that you work from that position upwards. You'll eventually be doing the top-down stuff as well, but work from the ground up so that you're building true value add capability for people who will actually be using your capability, rather than going top down, which will result in private pace or private Smith being handed some unwieldy, heavy piece of equipment they didn't ask for. We really, really tried hard in that way. And maybe to come back around to your question that prompted this line of discussion, our very first touch with the Army was with the U.S. Army, which is one of our largest customers. We're in low rate initial production, or LRIP, with a very large program effort there where our flagship product, Farsight, is being adopted. Our first touch with them, sometimes we say it was with Brigadier General Tony Potts, who was the program executive officer at the time of that first contact. But really, it was a series of interactions with privates and sergeants and, junior lieutenants out in the range. So that by the time we actually did have the first touch with, an empowered program executive officer like General Potts, all of the demand signal, all of the supporting documentation was already in place, so that all they had to do was turn to their advisory group and say, what do the guys say? Well, they want it already? Oh, well, this is an easy decision. And so we went very smoothly from that into a series of events that had us kind of streamlined into a more deliberate and scaled acquisitions exercise there.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I just want to reflect back to you. I think you both, there's a ton of really big ideas in what you just shared there. The first, and maybe it's where you ended, is we hear so many companies now that raise the round and hire the advisory board and talk about, General so-and-so, they really like our stuff. Like General so-and-so said that we should keep going, like they like our, and this idea of the bottom, and you can't just have one, it's bottom up, top down, or packing the stands or stacking the deck, or making sure that when you're ready, when you do crush it, that there is someone there to pick up pieces. But I think the starting bottom up is really powerful, because ultimately you do hear a lot of times these guys get washed over, even the middle management level, the 05s, 06s of the world, and people say, we'll get a general officer just to come down and throw the lightning bolt. That's right. And I think we see that is, maybe you catch lightning in a bottle once, but that is not a sustainable business development strategy to go from 0 to 1 as a defense tech company. See, Dave, it looks like maybe you want to comment on that.
I'm strongly agreeing with you. We believe.
I'm just agreeing with you. I'm just telling you what you said.
Yeah, grassroots. We started with, of course, the soft community, right? There's a little bit of there's a little higher appetite for risk and doing interesting or unique things. So we started with the soft community, but also the 82nd and the 101st Airbornes of the world, and we started at grassroots. And not that the PEO actual, not that the general is not helpful in this process. They are, but in Tony Potts's in that situation, that's an acquiring authority. They've already been told what to buy. Yeah. They've been told what to buy by a requirements development community, by input from the user community. Even if General Potts had said, guys, this is the greatest thing I've ever, which is basically what he said. This is amazing. I wish I had it yesterday. That doesn't rewind the clock on the POM and the requirements generation process that is going to give him the budget or the authority to acquire our thing. It just starts the clock on his awareness that this is coming down the pipe through a process that is much bigger than him. Yeah. We have to remember that the acquiring authorities that buy things on behalf of the DoD are handed a shopping list of what to buy. And so they can make some decisions about are we going to get the organic corn, or are we going to get the standard corn, and do the math on which one's going to be better for the warfighter. But they've been told to buy corn.
Yeah. So let's pick up that story then. I mean, it sounds like you had done your legwork. You had this opportunity to. How did you even get the opportunity to go in front of acquiring official like that in General Potts?
So that preceded you joining Dave by only a couple of days, I think. But we had kind of 2 routes in that culminated in a tech scouting event where we had a virtual presentation. This is in the thick of COVID. Virtual presentation. Everyone's wearing masks, even though we're all virtual. It was very strange. It's very strange. It was a different time, though. Different time, different America. But Yeah, so we had organically kind of networked our way into some of the echelons within Program Executive Office Soldier, PEO Soldier, one of the big acquiring and program executive offices. And in parallel, we had been speaking with some folks who eventually became our strategic investors at Booz Allen Hamilton. Booz Allen Hamilton had been handed a contract or awarded a contract by PEO Soldier to run a tech scouting initiative for AI or AI adjacent tools that could be rapidly prototyped and fielded to the U.S. Army infantry. And we had done all of the work, like we talked about before, to build an extremely compelling, what we thought at the time was like field ready TRL, whatever 9, technology readiness level, like ready to go capability, when in fact it was just a very serious prototype. But we could at that point put it in front of decision makers, tactical operators for solid feedback. And it was a fully functioning, software application. So by the time we got in front of them, we could do a full screen share demo of our capability. It was operating. It was meeting a lot of their, small R requirements. It was probably on the way to informing and satisfying big R requirements within the acquisitions framework. But that was our first touch. And then it took a heck of a lot of effort downstream of that. The vague head nod we got from General Potts during that virtual session, then matriculated into, what has now become a 3.5, 4-year endeavor to get into the acquisitions pipeline, which has resulted in like procurement and fielding. So that was first touch, but we moved from that into soldier touch points and a soldier enhancement program engagement. Dave can probably pick up the thread from here. He's the one running the show.
Yeah. So you were talking about the other vendors that we have this interested general, right? Even if the general is most interested, what happens next? The general tells a full-bird colonel to do it, right? Who tells the colonel whose portfolio matches to do it, who usually ends up telling a major to do it, right? So there's usually an O4 somewhere involved in the acquisitions community who has the rose pinned on him. In this case, it was Major Brad Benjamin, who had a great reputation from 75th Ranger Regiment, had a great reputation in the acquisitions community for moving faster and breaking more things than your standard, zero risk sort of acquiring authority. So Brad said, "Hey, Dave, let's go. Soldier enhancement program. We'll procure a bunch of your capability. We'll get it tested with the 101st and 82nd Airborne." And to Garrett's point, I would say that the TRL level at that time was a 9. Sure. The TRL was there. I think one of the things that we always forget.
That's what we told people. Anyway.
It's 9 of this guy, 7 of this guy.
One man's 7 is another man's 9. Yeah.
But can I? So the soapbox that I'm going on because you've heard me say it 20 times. May I do my normal soapbox?
Preach.
So the TRL was 9, but the thing that I think a lot of vendors forget or
by the
don't
way,
know.
9 is give us what is 9 meant to be? 9
is validated in an operational context.
Validated in operational context.
Yeah. As you progress through the tables, you test in the lab, you test in a relevant environment. 9 means a warfighter has used it somewhere, right? And it's done what it's supposed to do. So the technology readiness level was very high, as objectively assessed by the United States government. But what we always forget is that's actually not the most meaningful in my mind for getting to a meaningful acquisition or meaningfully into a program. It's the integration readiness level. We're talking about edge-based software on a mobile device working with a UAS system. But if we simplify that way down, let's think about the program manager that's just buying new tires for Humvees or for military vehicles, right? You may have a tire that is half the cost and half the maintenance or logistics burden as the tire they're currently buying. But that PM can't do anything with it and won't do anything with it until you have proven that it clears the wheel well and what its impacts are on the gas mileage and what it looks like for a run flat until that PM is absolutely certain that it works very well within that complete system that is that vehicle.
And you haven't even mentioned manufacturing readiness level, MRL, which for most hardware programs is just as critical as those, because if you can't produce it at scale at the quality level they require and it's integrated and the technology's ready, I mean, it's a whole cascading set of things, right?
Exactly.
I think the context of this, even as we talk about, people say the best product doesn't always win. What you're actually saying is it's not even about the product. It's what's the wraparound.
That's right.
What are the things that you need to have in place to even give the government a shot to give your product a shot?
And this is why the big defense prime contractors, it's like chic to, complain about them and throw rocks and whatever. Cast shade, I think is what Dave said earlier. It's like popular to do that and like it rolls off the tongue real smooth, except that they have essentially de-risked all of these other wrapper items that you're referring to, Noah, and that Dave is describing. They've de-risked that for the government. So when the government looks at all the options, yeah, maybe the prime's more expensive. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit slower. But they've solved every other problem that really matters to them beyond the technology capability itself.
So what sort of team did you have in place to do there's a program management component to this. There's all of those other things. You guys are still not a huge team. What did you have in place at this moment, 4 years ago to kind of be ready?
Yeah. So I'll start off on like core capabilities and then Dave will kind of describe what evolved beyond that, from, a capture and sustainment and go to market kind of perspective. So the company 5.5, 6 years ago started out with just 2 knuckle dragon Marines, my co-founder Andrew Dixon and I, with 2 exceptional technology talents, John Laxon and Parker Clark, our chief product officer and chief technology officer, respectively. Both creme de la creme, Stanford, top of class types, had both done the startup stuff in Silicon Valley, could build anything. These are the 2 guys who could build literally anything given enough time and money, right? That's who these guys are. So what we had with those guys, and then by the time Dave joined, we had like a very compelling prototype around our flagship product, which is called Farsight. We had an extremely compelling high TRL, not quite there on IRL or the other things, but like high TRL demonstration capability that was ready to be integrated, ready to be refined and bulletproofed along the way. So by the time Dave comes into the picture, we've got a fully functioning high grade prototype. Dave then starts as the lead, the solo kind of go to market operator to build the nucleus of a team that could de-risk everything else that we're describing. So Dave, I'll let you pick it up from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And so I think that we came to the conclusion pretty quickly, or I think we already knew that whether you want to call it, customer success or mission operations, but, the SMEs that were former UAS operators in our case, largely former UAS operators, or soft operators or infantry types, from the service, that was the most critical thing that we needed for that grassroots movement, right? If we're going to spend a ton of time on the range, making the product better, ensuring all those integration tasks, right? Because I just told you we have to work perfectly within that system of systems. So I have to work very well with every UAS system that's a program of record, every optical train it may have on it, every type of this device, every process for validating and certifying our software to work on that device or on that computer.
Ton of stuff.
So we needed a team of, obviously we have the brilliant engineering team. Then we've got me out telling the story and attempting to understand where we can intersect the requirements with the authority and the funding and the contract and the priority. We also needed that third thing, which is, former warfighter, veteran, battlefield expertise out there on the range doing the work. And that work was happening at, Stone Bay for MARSOC. It was happening at Fort Liberty, with the tier, with the Special Forces groups. It was happening with the 82nd and the 101st Airborne. That credibility of, we have a very talented team that will come and work shoulder to shoulder with you, to accomplish these integration tasks was absolutely critical. And then once we built that very clear, clean, overwhelmingly positive reputation, that we were professionals and we would fix things quickly and provide you a better product on the range, live if we can. Then we added, I can't do everything, right? Then there's an expert for contracts and capture. And, eventually there's a proposal, management aspect. Then there's eventually a lead per service. I was focused on the Army and we were focused on SOCOM because it moves very fast. We were focused on the Army because I think the conventional Army is probably one of the largest impacts we can have just by volume. They have 23,000 of these devices that we operate on. But the Marines, hey, what are you guys doing over there? The Air Force. Hey, you guys are working with tactical UAS. What about the big, exquisite UAS systems? So then we essentially went out and decided that we needed like a very talented, very experienced, not a pressury salesperson, but somebody that understood the academic process of the way that the DoD assesses and acquires capabilities for each service, and one for the international.
I'll say one more thing to round out what I think a winning formula for a team configuration ought to be for a company like ours trying to disrupt in the way that we're doing in a beneficial way. And it's that oftentimes the customer the acquisition authority, the end user, all the way from private to general, they're all nodding yes, sometimes very vigorously, right? And they're pressing the green light. It's time to go, except that they don't have any money. Dave alluded to the POM cycle, or the budgeting process that the executive agency departments go through with their counterparts in Congress every year, that basically forecasts and bakes in the defense budget for their specific program over a multi-year period. That means that sometimes you catch them in a weird part of the cycle and they literally won't have money for 12 months, that they can discretionary capital to spend on innovative projects or spend against emerging requirements. So in those off-cycle years, it's almost it can be a godsend to the customer, to the acquiring authority, to those partners that we've developed on the acquisition side of the house, if you help them solve that problem. Yeah. And how can you help them solve that problem? You go to the U.S. Congress. The U.S. Congress has the ability on a fiscal year cycle to directly appropriate dollars against program elements in the recurring Defense Appropriations Act. Now, earmarks are illegal. You cannot detail company X will receive Y dollars, in exchange for Z services. That is illegal. But what can happen is you can fuse together the complex of vendor set A has an interesting collection of capabilities. User group or customer, DoD customer, DoD acquiring authority has this set of requirements, but don't have money. And Congress can direct money, but doesn't understand the problems that the others are dealing with. And when you fuse all that together, you can actually, help inform the budgeting process on an annual basis so that money is directed in innovative ways to programs that want to do innovative things that allow for customers to do things off cycle. So I realize that was probably a little bit of an esoteric dive, but it has been essential for our company. We've been in the mix on probably something around $20 million worth of directed appropriations over 4 or 5 fiscal year cycles with our partners in Congress. And it has not only accelerated the potential adoption of our technology, but has really generated huge amounts of trust and great working relationships with our acquisitions and customer relationships on the agency side. So it's been really, really important.
Let me just say that back to you, and perhaps with less euphemism, which is that I think you're talking about lobbying and government affairs when you talk about directed acquisition, right? I mean, but what's I think unique about the way I just heard you frame that, and I'm not sure I've ever heard anyone frame it quite this way before, is that the congressional relations, the work that you were doing, was you still described it as solving a customer's problem.
That's right.
Which is they need this thing. They don't have the ability to buy this thing because they lack sufficient budget. So we solve their mission problem, and now we solve their acquisition problem.
That's right.
Their budgetary problem by doing what only we can do from the outside. So I think that's an incredible frame, and I would just kind of foot stomp that and underscore that and highlight it, bold it, and star it for the audience, because I think, again, there's another place where companies talk about lobbying to get us money quickly. Get companies lobby to get themselves money. First of all, you can't lobby to get yourself money.
It's illegal.
It's illegal. You can't do it. Yes, you can stack the deck and you can put your finger on the scale to make sure that your customer gets their money. But if you frame it in that way, and that's the ethos that you're coming into the process with, you stand a much, much, much better chance of actually positively impacting the outcome. So I love that framing. And Garrett, you had kind of shared a little bit about this previously in our conversation. You started those activities fairly early on in the company, and you didn't necessarily do it with like a big old Cadillac, team of lobbyists. What was early congressional relations like for you?
Go ahead, Dave. Before you answer, I have to.
Yeah, please go for it. Yeah.
So
Dave's laughing because
I'm laughing because when Garrett asked me to come over to Reveal, and I understood from personal pain how important that part of the game is, right? Like establishing such a relationship of trust where your customer sees you as a way that they can solve that problem of, I didn't know this existed 2 years ago, so I didn't plan and budget for it. So you can have that conversation. And I understood how important lobbying was as a part of a good go-to-market defense tech firm. It was one of the first questions I asked you when you interviewed me was, do you have a lobbying team? Who's got your ground game on Capitol Hill? And he laughed because he was doing it all personally.
I wasn't doing it all personally. I had an intern. Thank you very much. But I had an exceptional intern. I'll give him a shout out, Matt White. who is he's a Navy aviator and an MIT HBS guy, and now an entrepreneur in his own right. He spent a summer, I think, in between his 2 MBA years with us and helped us build what essentially was a very lightweight early skeleton of what a government relations team could or should be. So in the earliest year or two, we actually didn't go to Congress saying, give our customer money. Like we weren't actually hunting money. We wanted to build good relationships of trust with our member counterparts on Capitol Hill and help educate them, because they don't know everything. They can't know everything. They actually need specialists from, industry and academia and wherever to inform their thinking on certain topics. So the first year we weren't chasing money. We weren't even talking with government customers about their budgetary needs or gaps. We simply wanted to build the relationships. And the way we did that was by going to a certain number of members and saying, we are building the next generation of AI-enabled software for tactical operations. What do you know about that? Oh, nothing? Great. Let us tell you about it. In fact, there's this thing called the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. We have thoughts about how the Congress and the Defense Department should be thinking and changing policy over time to ensure that it's not only riding the wave of new technology, but can even help create the wave and aim it in a direction that's going to be useful for national defense. So our earliest years was focused on getting what's called reports language into the National Defense Authorization Act, which doesn't appropriate money. It simply shapes thinking and kind of sets the follow-on years, sets the Congress up in follow-on years to appropriate money effectively against problems that are emerging with technology and solutions that are relevant. Once we, exhausted our intern, we ended up engaging outside lobbyists, lobbying firms. We're probably in the near future going to bring a GR, a government relations capability in-house, simply because we found it to be so helpful and effective, mostly in building and maintaining informed high education relationships with members on the Hill, but also in terms of helping our customers get access to resources.
No, I think it kind of goes back to the old adage of if you ask for money, you'll get advice. If you ask for advice, you might darn well end up with some money. And I think it's starting to build a relationship before you need something and it becomes a transaction is just a key kind of no nonsense.
I can see the relief on the members and the staffers' faces when they're like, all right, what do you want? And we said, we just want to talk with you about the future of artificial intelligence and national security. We don't have a request per se. We're not looking for money or appropriations. We want to help you understand what's coming. Relief, immediate relief, guards down. They just wanted to learn, and we wanted to inform them. And it ended up being extremely productive over many years. Yeah. We still have some of those key relationships in place to this day. It's been 4.5 years. Yeah,
that's awesome. So let's come back to this. So 4.5 years ago, first touch points. What strikes me is you spun up a lot of these activities kind of very quickly, right? Dave coming on very early, building some of that team out, starting to think about not just TRL, but IRL. And IRL is such a funny kind of, it's integration readiness level, but also kind of in real life. And that's kind of a nice, nice double use there. But so you started that process and you said, notably, it's 4.5 years ago. Now you guys have had a big year. Big award. We can talk about your STRATFI win and kind of where you're at in this valley hopping process. Yeah. But what else took place over the last 4.5 years? What from initial go signal and all right, so now we're starting to do some of these warfighter integrations. We're doing some of these exercises. What were the big milestone moments for you in that 4.5 year journey?
Let me take a swing at this, Dave. You'll probably know some more relevant milestones that we hit along the way, but jump in if useful. In the acquisitions framework, I'm going to speak about the U.S. Army first through from the perspective of engagement with PEO Soldier, Program Manager Net Warrior, which is the program into which our flagship product Farsight is going to be adopted at scale as we move from low-rate production into full-rate production over the next couple of years. We were unanimously approved for an initial block of funding and prototyping through the Soldier Enhancement Program, which is an innovation program the U.S. Army runs to ensure ensure that its tactical echelons are serviced by the best innovations that are matched up against requirements that are emerging. And that carried with it a mandate and a pot of resourcing that allowed PEO Soldier to engage with a private company like ours to build the next generation of capability. So that happened. Huge number of soldier touch points, STPs, which happen along the way, a number of acquisitions, hurdles, and decisions. Eventually, we get to what's called Milestone C, which is a critical decision point where the acquisition authority and the requirements writers look at each other, they head nod, aggressively at each other and say, go, go. That authorizes the next kind of tranche of activity. And now we, in the last quarter, have deployed the first tranche of low rate production capability to the U.S. Infantry in the 82nd Airborne Division. And we expect that to be basically the wedge in for the rest of the Army enterprise and the 30 plus brigade combat teams that are scoped to receive capability over the next few years. So that's the U.S. Army. Dave, anything you'd add in there? Critical milestones?
Yeah, I'll foot stomp one of those that you brought up, which was that soldier enhancement program. That is really was our entry and a common entry into, meaningful evaluation for programmatic adoption.
Yeah.
The SEP, the Soldier Enhancement Program, it had not historically been used to procure software. It's designed to buy gloves and weapons optics and wrenches, largely for the infantry community. But it had not historically been used, to my knowledge, it had never been used to procure software capability before. But because this software was unique and it was hyper tactically focused, which was new for that customer, new for PEO Soldier, for me, the real milestone there was the willingness of this acquisitions and procurement apparatus to say, okay, software is now a tactical infantryman's tool.
Yep.
For me, that was the real milestone, was them paying us for software licenses for edge, for mobile devices.
So you're completely right, Dave. I would say that's the soft precursor to a really material milestone, which was certification on the U.S. Army mobile network. And our flagship Farsight product is now so I'm going to get fact checked on this one, I'm sure. But I think we're the only commercial solution that's currently certified to run on the Army's mobile network, which means that it's a huge wedge in for us. Our long vision being we want to be a serious provider of mobile and edge-based software provision to all of the U.S. DoD enterprise. And so we feel very confident about that, given those milestones in the Army story.
Let me ask you something. How much of this process did you guys understand upon embarkation? Like, is this something that you knew as you had that first touch point on day one? You're like, this is generally how this is going to go. What percentage of this, and then, what percentage was emergent where it's like, we didn't know about these five?
So I'll just say, and then I'll hand off to Dave. I'm just going to say this really quickly. I'm a head in the clouds, visionary CEO type who's not grounded in reality, right? Like that's how people like me often end up, right? Like we think big, we cast big vision, and it's not grounded in reality. It's naive, maybe even ignorant. I don't know. So when Dave was coming on board and I described to him, hey, we're going to deploy at full scope production, whatever, in, X time. And he's probably thinking, he's like nodding, smiling to me. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sure. And he's saying it's actually going to be X plus, 3 years probably, right? And so I had very high hopes. I think my expectations were not adequately managed as the chief executive of the company, which translated into I'll just say, in the interest of full disclosure, friction between the expectations of the investor community and others, enablers and partners for us along the journey. Dave was much more grounded in reality, having gone through this in previous companies and having come from either within the acquisitions community or adjacent to it and having observed and worked with it firsthand. Dave, you're much more grounded.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. To be fair, I think this has actually gone much faster.
Don't tell me that.
I think this has actually gone much faster than it rightfully should. The capability development process. The capability development process we usually think about in terms of about 8 years,
sure.
At minimum, right?
Sure.
And so the 4 or 5 years. I think, yes, there was, I think I was probably a little more grounded in reality. However, I think what I didn't fully appreciate was that we would actually see a limitation on the proliferation of UAS systems.
Oh, sure.
So my incorrect assumption joining Reveal was that the required sensing capabilities that I would need to sell to the Department of Defense were already all over the battlefield. And I didn't know that they weren't, because I have been working facing not the hyper tactical echelon. So I didn't realize that the high quality short range reconnaissance, long range reconnaissance sort of class of systems hadn't actually reached all of our customers yet. So there's a fundamental limitation of a lot of the customers I was attempting to sell to didn't have a drone.
Yeah.
Which is fundamental to our flagship product.
This is a really important thing to call out, because it again highlights the integration readiness level thing that we keep talking to and returning to. And it's that there is a huge networked group of technologies that are all interdependent and need to be integrated with each other. And many times the acquisition and fielding of those technologies has to be adequately sequenced and de-risked. And it's almost impossible for a vendor to really know for sure whether that environment is stable and ready, or if it's going to take a couple of years. And I think if I could rewind, the clock a bit, I would have padded my expectations by at least a couple of years. And I think that would have been much more healthy. But at the same time, some of that expectation management fail that we had meant that we were approaching the problem set, the customer, and the product development cycle really aggressively, which is good. We built a next generation capability on a timeline that's unheard of, right? And so I don't necessarily regret it, and I think we've done right by our customers, but it has meant that we've needed to be patient. We've needed to invest in capabilities for integration. We've needed to get even deeper with the customer set and with partners so that we understand their pain points that are not just tactical problems. They're actually acquisition problems and integration problems. So it's a big web of dependencies.
But that mismatch of expectations versus reality and still driving the product forward as fast as you did, what that resulted in is one of the key milestones that we haven't talked about, which was USASOC, MARSOC, NSW, taking the capability to global hotspots. Right. That's one of the real milestones here, because even aside from all that academic programmatic adoption acquisitions mumbo jumbo that I just talked about, the first question in any room, it doesn't matter if it's the general, the major, or the sergeant first class paratrooper, who's used it in combat?
Yeah.
First question.
That's right.
So a major.
At what point did they do that for you guys? Where along the journey?
That was October of 2021. We had elements of USASOC. Yeah. We had elements of USASOC taking it into theater. I don't think I'll go into details in this conversation, but took us into theater, took our technology into theater. We had, very active, bidirectional communication between our engineering and mission ops team and the deployed capability. As with any early product, there was a huge amount of feedback and refinement that happened over a multi-month, even multi-year period. But once we had gotten that notch in the belt, so to speak, it was an easy conversation when we went back to program managers and the acquisitions authorities. Oh, they're using it? Okay, great. We'll call them, but that's great, right?
Yeah, 100%. There's, I think part of this, part of proving the TRL, part of proving the IRL, part of my job is to produce everybody in this process with a stack of CONUS and OCONUS test reports, combat evaluations. Here was the context. Here was the CONOPS. Here were the results against in this system of systems, or with this set of UAS capabilities, or on this type of device.
Your job was to make their job easy.
I don't regret that, because that's why my job exists.
I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think it's recognizing your job is you're there to help, right? It's like the North Star is support them in the mission. That might be acquiring your software. It might be, figuring out an acquisition process. It might be writing a document, right? You're there to support their mission.
100%. And to Garrett's point about he is seen as a, trusted entity in the, elected representative National Capital Region, Congress sort of, hey, Garrett, what do you think about, robotics and global conflict? And as he's seen as a trusted resource there, we partner at that level all the way down.
Yeah.
So the way he's seen as that resource for the senators and Congress people, I am frequently that resource for General Rainey. Like R4 hailed me down to Austin, Texas, to ask me how to fix the Army SBIR program, right? And he did that because he thinks that we know what we're talking about and sees us as a credible resource. And to y'all's point earlier, the time I met him before that, I didn't ask him for anything.
Yeah. That's
right.
I didn't walk in his office and ask him to sign a check. I said, hey, sir, this is how I see the future battlefield. What do you think from a vendor's perspective?
A couple of comments, Noah, just to maybe pull on a couple threads that you teed up for us. And I realize I'm mixing metaphors right there. That's amazing. It's totally on style for me.
It's like Joe Rogan. We're on hour 3 here. So
yeah. Oh man. Could I do that show? I don't know if I could actually do that show. That would be intense. But so Dave and I have focused very strongly, very heavily on our U.S. Army engagement, right? And that has its own so-called valley of death that we are successfully transiting. We're on the upslope, right?
Yeah.
We're climbing out of it. I think we're going to be very successful there, all of those things. And we touched a little bit on the special operations community. We didn't talk about a couple of other areas where we have been successful and which honestly comprise their own mini valleys of death, right? I mean, like each engagement is its own valley and each one becomes easier to overcome as you grow revenue because cash sustains you over those periods, but also as you get muscle memory and pattern recognition and relationships that help you navigate those things more quickly and more efficiently. We, like many companies in our space, have engaged in the pursuit of an execution on SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research, contract awards, phase 1, phase 2, et cetera, et cetera. And we have received TACFI, tactical funding increase, and STRATFI, strategic funding increase, supplemental phase 2 awards over the past many years. We were most recently awarded a STRATFI contract worth $33.6 million that had attached to it a variety of AFSOC, Big Air Force, and JSOC customer sets that are, and that contract is, not only do we think of it as a signal that the DoD and the agencies and program managers in question trust us and think that we could be good fits long-term as programmatic vendors, but it also allows us to really grease the skids. Again, mixing metaphors or throwing more such metaphors out there. But anyway, allows us to really get into that groove with 3 more programs. And the STRATFI contract is intended to, over a multi-year period, get you TRL high, TRL 9, IRL high, IRL 9, and get you ready all the way through that process with enough time for the program managers to budget for procurement, to ensure that the requirements are lined up. So for as much as, small vendors and the venture capital community likes to complain that the Defense Department isn't doing things that help non-traditional contractors like us generate and deliver and then capture value in this process, things like the STRATFI program are actually pretty darn good at laying all of the milestones out, laying a really clear programmatic pathway out. And we've had an excellent, set of relationships and experiences on that contract, and know that we're going to be delivering, long-term programmatic value to at least 3 more programs coming out of that STRATFI contract.
It's huge. And I think you've mentioned, Garrett, as well. I mean, you guys are now in a place where, let's call it, dare we say, product market fit with this first product. And now you can start thinking about a second. And I know you guys have gone through an acquisition of a company now. Sure. And so I guess as we move towards the close of our time here together, just kind of give us a sense of where are you on the journey today relative to where you want to be, and where's Reveal going? Yeah.
So quick note, we did make an acquisition earlier this year, a company called DFL Technology, founded and run by an exceptional guy named Isaac Riddle, and his co-founder, Jim Carlson. They built a technology and submitted against a SOCOM solicitation for which there was limited hope that they, as a tiny 2, 3, 4 person shop, could ever successfully compete for this thing. And they beat out the competition. Wow. And they were recognized as being the superlative, new entrant to this competition, beating out existing prime contractors. And the production contract award has not been let yet for their for that technology that we've acquired and brought into our product portfolio. But we are very hopeful that it will. And at minimum, it's a high viability, high TRL, high IRL capability that we can sell and deliver to all kinds of different customers. So we're very excited and very happy about that. And that was its own, transit of the Valley of Death. So where are we going? Reveal is establishing itself as a multi-product platform. In other words, a prime contractor in the making that will have a portfolio of valuable products that can be commercialized in all kinds of different flavors, varieties, and with all kinds of different customers. So we intend long-term to be exactly that, a consolidator, a platform. We know that the the recipe that we have discovered for configuration of team, the capability set that we have, means that new technologies, if added to the Reveal platform, don't have to go through the 3, 5, 7-year period in order to actually get adopted at scale. We can facilitate the acceleration of adoption by customers who trust us. And because we have a platform that can accelerate on all fronts. So that's part of it. And the other is that we are developing, and I think are recognized at this point as the rising standard for mobile and edge software capability. And by mobile and edge, we're really trying to describe ourselves as the primary software vendor for the tactical echelon. People who are operating at the tactical edge. So we're not talking giant JADC2, hyper connected, cloud enabled, comms dependent, suites of architecture that live up there in the clouds. Like that stuff is awesome. And I'm glad that there are big vendors going after those contracts and generating that value over a multi-year period. Glad that they're doing it, and I'm glad they're not competing with us. We are becoming the standard for software in the tactical and mobile environment. Because of that, we recognize the future is AI. Artificial intelligence, you can squint at any number of objects and call it AI. But what we are developing long term is a suite of tools that are operable on a mobile or edge device. Think a mobile handset, think an augmented reality headset, think a gesture control device, small drones, small robot companions operating in the battle space. And that there will be an AI layer that makes all of that cohesive, sticky, interoperable, and high value to extend the human operator so that they can do things with much less risk to the human operator and extending their ability way beyond a single operator to the robotic ecosystem that lives in and around them and to their teammates so that, we can deter or win the next war.
I don't know that there's that I could possibly follow that. So maybe let's end on this, guys. I think as you've both been in this space for a good chunk of time in public service, continuing that service in the private sector, continuing as reservists. As you look at kind of the ecosystem today, in a line or two, what are you most excited about in kind of the defense and defense technology ecosystem right now?
I'm going to sort of attempt to answer that by sort of tying my comments here together. Because we are so focused on to be honest, I feel like largely ignored from a capability acquisitions perspective, the tactical echelon, because we're hyper focused there and we care a lot. And that's also the echelon that I work in, when I put a uniform on. I am very excited for what happens when our tactical leaders have a battle staff that does all of the analysis and distills all the information. They keep giving my tactical leaders more and more and more capability and more sensor feeds and more stuff. I'm really excited for a squad to now be as capable as a battalion used to be. And instead of 20 lieutenants following that squad leader around and analyzing things and producing the results, I'm excited for the AI to do that.
Yeah. I am excited about outcomes. I'm just going to call it one word, right? I'm excited about outcomes. What do I mean by that? I'm excited for an escalating wave of non-traditional contractors like Reveal being awarded bigger and more important, more impactful production grade technology contracts. I'm excited for that outcome. I'm excited for the proof point outcomes that will come from venture capital and risk capital outlays into our ecosystem that return value to limited partners and venture funds and everybody else in the investor community, because that is a signal that this community is generating, delivering value, and capturing and returning value into the ecosystem. I'm excited for those outcomes. And I think that's important because that set of outcomes is what will keep non-traditional contractors, the entrepreneurial class, the risk capital providers interested and excited about the national security mission. If we don't have those kinds of outcomes, they'll find something else to do. They'll find somewhere else to put that capital. They'll find the next dating app to throw their entrepreneurial spirit at, right? But you know what? The most important outcome that I'm excited about is the tactical outcome and the warfighting capability outcome. If we are not realizing those two outcomes that I just described, it's a signal that we're not actually generating the mission impact that we're intending to have. And so the revenue signal that I care so much about as a CEO and that my investors and board care so much about from their standpoints is really just a metric that is measuring whether we're generating value for the warfighter. I want mission outcomes. I want us to deter China. I want us to deter the next bad guy, right? I want to deter North Korea. I don't want North Korea to send troops to Russia to fight in Ukraine. I want to deter that by having so much awesome capability that they don't even think about doing that stuff. We can have that peace through strength world that I think many folks in our positions, dream about. I think that is a possibility. That's the outcome that I really want.
Awesome. I am energized just by getting the chance to spend this time with you guys. It's amazing what you're building, not just what you're building, but how you're doing it. I think you really are. We started the conversation talking about building the right way. And that's where I'd end is I think, there's a lot of players in the space, but seeing folks who can articulate not just the what, but also the how and the why and that whole stack. That's how you attract and retain talent. It's how you retain, investment as a means to an end. And it's how you generate those mission outcomes. So, rooting for you guys. Thank you for spending the time with us today and look forward to tracking the journey and having you back on here as Reveal starts winning more programs in the years ahead.
Can't wait to celebrate, Noah. Thanks.
Thanks, Noah.